Oh no, it's already recording. This is gonna go well. So as you can see from what I've got up, I've already grabbed my notes for the day and I have Minitab Express open as always. So one of the things of my goals for today, since this is your first time interacting with Minitab Express, is to show you some tools and tricks to help this go a little smoother for you, as well as how I set up my system. So you should probably be seeing the navigator bar since Express defaults to showing that. I usually turn it off just because all it really does is take up space unless I need to go back and look at something. So I usually hide the navigator in my view. You'll notice that I currently have no data showing up in here, and if you have already gone onto our course website, you'll notice that there are the files that you need for this lesson. I'm in weekly folders, week 2 describing data, Minitab assignment number 1, and you need the smoking data and the Minitab lesson number 1. I've already downloaded both of those and they are sitting in my downloads right here if I wanted to grab them from there, and I've already opened the Word document so I don't need to do that. And I wanted to show you how to open an Excel file in Minitab Express, which you can do. Minitab Express will take lots of different types of data files, so don't be afraid to take just about any data file you have and try and open it using Minitab. And here's the way that you can most easily do that. So since I have Express already open, I'm going to go up to File and then Open Worksheet. Notice I'm using Worksheet, not Project, since this is just data. And there she goes. Notice Excel is an option. Notice I can't open a Word document, which totally makes sense since it's not data. I have it in my downloads. So there we go. There's the data I need. She's going to take a minute to decide everything's cool with that. Come on. Let's hit OK. Or sorry, open. Oh, it opened a new one for me. Okay, it didn't do that last time, so that's fun. Um, let's just move this over. There we go. And there we go. I got my data in here and it came through all smooth. One of the things I've noticed about Minitab Express is if your data is formatted with any type of symbols in it, like if it has a $sign for money or commas in weird places, often you'll have to reformat that data first, just because when it sees that, it interprets it as text instead of numbers. So there's that. Anyway, let's get into making some stuff on Minitab Express. If you want to, you can read through this and get a better description of what this data is about. One thing to notice is that when you're looking at this data and the worksheet and how it's organized, unlike Excel, it doesn't start out as one. It starts with this like blank space where you put the name of your variables, and then it starts out with first entry, second entry, and so on and so forth. So like my third female has a bachelor's, she has one child, she does not smoke, and there's her height, weight, and pulse rate. Based on what you see. You'll also notice these C labels. That's the other way the columns get labeled, so that if you have a piece of data in here that you didn't give a name to, you can just use the name C8 instead, for instance. So there's that. So let's go ahead and create ourselves some tables. So the first thing we're going to do is create a frequency table and a relative frequency table of level of education. So how you create tables in Minitab Express, which this is different from Minitab 18. If you watch these videos, they are exactly the same. You should be watching the one that matches the version you have. So if you have a PC, you should be watching the video above this one. If you have a Mac, you are on the right one, in case that was unclear. I do have my Mac in dark mode. All that does is change the colors on Word. That does not affect your ability to do Minitab. It just looks a little different and it is a little easier on my eyes. Sorry, I like dark mode. All right, back to making a graph. I'm going to go to Summary. Come on. There she goes. And I want to do a tally. You'll notice that some of the words Minitab Express uses is different from what we will be using because Minitab was made by the British. You know, yay colonialism. So I need to enter a variable in here. So sometimes when you open things in Minitab, the white boxes here where there is a space for a variable will not be lit up, and then you will not see any variables over here in this box on the side. So if it ever is like that, you just need to click into it and the variables will show up. And that's going to happen at least once to us today, I bet. All right, the other thing to notice is it's labeled our variables for us. So when they've got this nice little smooth look to them, that means that Minitab thinks they are continuous and therefore quantitative. When it's got a box look to it, that means that Minitab has decided that these are definitely categories in here and therefore this is qualitative data, which is exactly what we want for ourselves making a table. So I'm going to throw level of education in here. And I'm going to do that by double clicking. Now the other way you can do that, I'm just going to delete that really quick. Come on. Oh, it yelled at me. Doesn't want me to delete stuff. Is if you're in this box, you can highlight this variable right here and then hit the over arrow and it'll also appear. So it's just two different ways to do the same thing. And if you're going through and doing a lot of these and there's a lot of setup things you need to do with lots of arrows, it's a little bit easier, I think, just to double click your way through. Now, I'm going to create a frequency table first, which means I'm going to leave this on count. So it's just going to count up how frequent my variable values occur for each category. And then when I do relative frequency, I'm going to be doing percentage. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And there we go. There's my table. So since I have my tally right here, I'm just going to copy my table over to Word. The easiest way to do this is to, if you have a magic mouse, you can right click and it'll give you the option to copy it directly as is, or you can copy it as a picture, which is what this one is. I'm going to do a regular copy. If you don't have a magic mouse, you can get this by holding down the command key and clicking. Oh, no, wait. No, it's the option one. I'm sorry. Nope, control. You can tell I've had my Mac for all of 3 weeks. It's the control button. Oh, I love it when I screw things up. I'm sorry. All right. I like the magic mouse. It seems to work a little better. All right, and then once I'm over here, I can do control, click, and then choose paste. I never use paste special. And there's my tally. Now, I like the copy and paste option because now it's copied as a table, so if you want to reformat the table to look a little nicer, you can. Like, I hate this word tally, so I'm going to go ahead and delete it because that's who I am as a person. Because I don't really feel like you need that, and there's no way to get rid of it other than to do what I just did. And then the other thing you might not like is this lower end, it always calls n equals, which you might not like that. You might be like, oh, well, that's really my total, so I'm going to change its name to total. So there we go. So there's our first table, our frequency table. So what I want to do now is I want to create a relative frequency table. So I just want to take all these and divide by 40 and then change it into a percentage so that I have relative frequency. Now you could do that by hand if you wanted to, and it wouldn't be that hard. But if you had something like 20 categories, you could see where that get real boring to do. So Minitab will actually do it for you. I'm sorry, I just want to remember I'm over down on the bit. The easiest way to do that is I want to take this and I just want to change one setting. So I'm going to hit make similar. And then I'm just going to change one of my settings. So make similar just brings up the last thing you did and then lets you change the options on it. So I'm going to change this to percents and take off counts, and that will give me percentages out of the total, which will be relative frequency. And there we go. There's our percentages. Now I kind of hate how this looks with all those little ... decimals. So, I mean, I wish there was a way to fix this, but there totally isn't on Express. Sad but true. And notice it didn't give me a total option, which is kind of fun. So I'm going to copy this and paste it into my document so I have my answers. And there we go. All done. Done with number 1. Let's move on to number 2. I'm going to hit enter and put this on the next page since I'm going to be putting a picture in there. So next up, I'm going to be creating a graph of what we just had. So I've got percentages, I've got my tables. Let's create a graph that goes with it. So unsurprisingly, all of your graphs are going to be found in the graph button. There are a couple little images that we'll create that we won't be using graphs for, like when we do regression and probability, but more often than not, this is the button you're going to be using when it comes to doing visuals. So I'm going to click on graph. Come on. I clicked the wrong button. Sorry. I accidentally did a right click. Oops. I'm going to go down. I want a bar chart this time for level of education. And I'm just going to do a simple one. We're going to do a more complicated one in a minute. Well, actually, it'll be a minute before we get to that. So I want to do a bar chart of level of education. Notice this is fairly simple. It's just like I want a simple one because I'm just doing one variable, nice and straightforward. And then hit ourselves in OK. And there's our bar chart. Now, me personally, I think this bar chart's a little boring, so I want to change some of my graph elements. So I'm going to add some data labels to this. There we go. I like that. Because I personally have a difficult time, and maybe this is just me and the fact that I need new glasses, but when something's like really far away from the axis, like I'll try to figure out, is it 3 or is it 4? Because like Without a ruler, it's kind of hard to tell. So I like the data labels because they give you a clear access as to what these values actually are for each of the bars. You can also leave your mouse hovering over them and you notice that it'll tell you what the values are. But unfortunately, when you copy this graph over to Word, that ability to hover and see what it is disappears. You can change some other things on this too if you want to. You can change scale, you can change all kinds of stuff. If you want to change like orientation, you can do that as well. Like maybe you want one that goes across. It's kind of nice. You can make it increasing or decreasing, or the default one, which is just alphabetical, which I kind of hate because bachelor's seems like it shouldn't be before high school. Wigs me out a little, but there's actually nothing I can do to fix that on Express. All right, so how do I copy a graph over? The easiest way to copy a graph over to your document is to leave your mouse anywhere in the gray space of the graph, and then if you have the magic mouse again, you can do the right click and choose to copy it, and then paste it over into your document. So to do copy and paste on the keyboard is usually Command C and Command V, just so you know. The Command key is the key that looks like a square with circles on each corner, in case you were unfamiliar with that. And then we're going to use this to answer some questions. So, using your results, how many females have studied for their master's degree as their highest level of education? Well, that's 9, because my 9 is nice and easy to see right there. And then for B, using your results, which level of education has occurred the least often, and how many females have had this education level? Well, you just look for the shortest bar, and that happens to be a 3. And that individual grouping is called the people who went and studied a PhD. Yay, we're rare. Good times. Anyway, so now that we've seen the bar chart, let's create ourselves a pie chart. I apologize that I keep using the same variable, but let's just say I got a little bored and I have to create a lot of these a lot, and I don't know. Maybe you like pie charts. I personally detest them, so we don't get along. It'll be okay. I think pie charts are good at only one thing, and that's what bothers me about them. They're like a one-trick pony, so to speak. Anyway, I'll show you what I mean. So we're going to go to Graphs, choose Pie Chart. I want counts of unique variables. That's because I have data. If you have a summary, you want to choose the other one. Let's throw level of education in there, and then we're going to hit OK. And then this is the default pie chart. Now, this is slightly better than Minitab 18 because it labels everybody kind of nicely. Like, here's my percentages. And I like this because if you're somebody who's colorblind, telling green and red apart is going to be real hard. But at the same time, like, it's not that great because I don't know who green and who red are if I'm colorblind. I just know that one of them is smaller than the other. So I'm going to improve on this a little bit with our options. The other thing is, like, if you didn't have these percentages, which most Minitab setups don't have that showing up, is about all you could say is it looks like red and green are the same. I'm sorry, yellow and red are the same, green is the small group, and then blue is the big group. Done! Let's change some of our options here. So if you click on the graph, I'm going to then go to my graph elements. I'm going to go to my slice labels. Notice how there's a little arrow here to get more options. I like to include category name and frequency. So that gives me more detail, not only how many, but also labels them individually, which I think is what you should do to make this more accessible. Now the last thing you can do that's kind of nice is usually you can click and drag these titles around. It doesn't look like this version is going to let me. Oh well. So that's all we're going to do to this. I like it to be more detailed, so that's what we're dealing with. If you don't like this, you don't have to do that, but again, at least include slice labels because, well, it just helps people be able to view your graphs more accessibly. So let's copy our graph over. Oh, it's not going to let me do that. Now it will. That was a little weird. It yelled at me. It made the boop mac bad noise. And there's my graph. And it did not fit on that page, so that was awesome. Oh well, what are you going to do? Using your graph, what percentage of females have no college education, i.e. their highest level of education attained is high school? And for this group, that's 27.5%. So seeing the percentage on a pie chart is really easy, and that's about it. Like I said, a little bit of a one-trick pony. Ooh, and I have a typo. I have table in here twice. I'm a teacher and I screw up. Gonna be perfect someday. Just kidding. Let's look at some two variable stuff. We're done with one variable. So let's create some tables. So I'm going to create a joint frequency table for smoking status and level of education. So what this is going to let us do is hopefully be able to tell a little bit about how those two variables interact. So in Minitab, you find creating a joint frequency table in the Tables button. Come on. Here we go. And I'm going to want a cross tabulation. That's the British name for this. Fun facts. So what you could do, and what we talked about doing in the notes for creating a joint frequency table, was going through and counting who would be yes and no for all your levels of education. But I just really don't want to do that because I'm lazy and there's 40 of them. And if you had like 1,000 of them, you super wouldn't want to do this. So I want to make Minitab do it for me. So I'm going to have a smoking status be my row variable. So I'm going to throw a smoking status in first. And then my column variable is going to be level of education. So there we go. And then you can hit display and see what your options are for displaying these. I'm not going to check any of these right now. I just want the raw data itself cross-tabulated. Sorry. Joint frequency tabled. Boy, that sounds worse. Here we go. And there's our table. I kind of like this. It's nice looking, right? That's a nice table. Let's copy it and paste it into our notes. Awkward. Actually do like this one. One warning I want to give you about these tables, and this is an incredibly common mistake. A lot of people will look at this and think to themselves, oh yeah, there's like 6 variables here. Yes, no, bachelor's, high school, master's, and PhD. 6. But that is absolutely incorrect. It's the most common mistake made with these tables. There's actually only 2 variables at play. Smoking status, which for its options of output are yes and no, and level of education, and its options for output are bachelor's, high school, master's, and PhD. These are also known as categories. So this one has 4 categories within this qualitative variable, and this one has 2 categories within this qualitative variable. Be careful. There are 2 variables here, and only 2. Trippy, right? Or not, depending on who you are as a person. Alrighty, so what we're going to do next is we're going to use that table to answer some questions. So I've left the table up on purpose so that I can, over on Minitab, so that I can use them to answer 6 A, B, C, and D. So among the females who smoke, what percent have a bachelor's degree? So I'm just looking at the yeses because those are the individuals who smoke. So out of just them, so just this row, how many have a bachelor's degree? So that would be 2 out of 9. And then I want to change this to percentages. In order to do that, I have to multiply by 100, and I will get 22.22%. Yep. Among the females who don't smoke, so I'm looking at just the no group, what percent have a master's degree? So that would be 8 out of 31. And then times 100 to get me a percentage. And that'll be, I'm going to have to do some rounding here, 25.81%. So I rounded up to 1 there. I'm just doing 2 decimal places because that's pretty typical. And I know I say 1/10 of a percent here, so, you know, there we go. Oh no, I don't want to do that. That is weird. Why does it think those 2 are connected? That was strange. Okay, what percentage of of all the females, so out of everyone, so here I'm going to be using the overall total, or the all group, which would be 40. Yeah, all of all. We usually call this the total of totals. What percent of what percent have high school and smoking? Oh, okay, so here I'm looking at 2 characteristics, or 2 categorical values within 2 different variables. So that's interesting. So that means it's going to be holding 2 of them, not just 1. Here I was interested in just 1, so I was looking at just 1 row, just 1 column. And here I got to look at 2 of them out of all. So I want high school and smoking. So high school and there is smoker, there's 6 of those out of 40. Times 100 to get me a percent. Some of you are already wondering, do I have to write the times 100? I'm your teacher. I have to explain where all the values come from. Therefore, I will write more detail than you probably ever will. Because I need everybody to see where this is coming from. And I've noticed that occasionally people watch my videos with the sound off. Which, I don't blame you. My voice is annoying. Alright. Out of all the females, so just everybody there, so out of everyone, 40, there are 40 of them. That's my total. That's going to be my denominator. What percent smoke? So I'm looking at all the smokers, which is just everybody who said yes. So the total for that is 9 out of 40. 9 out of 40 times 100. See, I like the first one better because you're dividing by 9, and there's a trick with 9s where it's just the numerator repeated a bunch, and there is no trick where when you divide into 9, but this is 22.5%. Doing that in my head did not go so smoothly. That one took me a little bit longer. Weirdly, this one was fast. I don't know what I'm doing. It's fine. Brains. Counting. Just pull out a calculator if you're not sure. It'll be okay. Okay, let's create a relative frequency bar chart for level of education separated by smoking status. So what I want to do is I want to compare these two. So I want to see how level of education affects smoking status. And you might think you see a pattern here because it looks like the no's are more than the yeses, but just looking at the values and then guessing whether or not they're the same is not the same as whether or not you can visually produce something that convinces you. So we're going to go to graphs. We're once again going to be choosing bar chart. This time I'm going to be choosing clustered. So we saw ones like this in our notes. And here's where you need to be careful. When you're clustering, the thing that you enter in last is going to be the thing that creates your clusters. So I say separated by smoking status, so I want to put that one in last. So I'm going to put in level of education first, and then smoking status, and then hit OK. And then I'm going to change some settings on this, but just, level of education first, smoking status second. Some of these changes you don't have to do. So notice here's my yeses and my nos, and this is kind of hard to compare because in particular I have just so many more people, I said peachel, which is not a word, people with bachelor's degree than I do everybody else that it's kind of hard to judge what's happening here. So I'm going to change this a little. This graph is fine if you're just going to do A and B, which I'm going to skip because this video is already too long and there's no questions like them in your homework. I'm going to click in here and go to my options. So here's the thing I want to do. I want to change my scale type to percentage. There we go. And that will help me understand what's going on here too. Do I want to change the layout? Oh, that won't help me at all. Do I need any table labels? No, I don't. That'll be fine. Scale type should be enough for you to be able to see. So I like using percentage a little bit better just because it'll help you see how the percentage of smokers changes. So what we're going to do is we're going to start as our lowest level of education, which is high school, and then watch how that no and yes changes. So the percent here is just about 12%. That said, just about, I think 15%, it's exactly 15%, we calculated it earlier, good job. 15% who said, yes, I am a smoker, and then it drops down to almost 12%, and then even further down, and then the number of yeses, the number of yeses I'm a smoker drops to nothing. So it looks like as I increase the level of education from high school, bachelor's, master's to PhD, I decrease in the likelihood that I'm going to smoke. So it does appear that these two are related to each other. Now, if you didn't like that explanation and didn't think it was so clear, go watch this part on the Minitab 18 video. Minitab 18 does have a couple other graph options, and the graph I use there is a little bit clearer as to tell what's going on, but I do like the option of using percentages because it removes the size problem. When one group is much larger than the other, if you use percents in those groups, it does fix the problem of, it appears that my percent of smokers or non-smokers amongst group is larger here just because there's more people. It's larger. Let's copy our graph, paste it into our document. I'm going to show you my last two trickaroos. So again, I'm not going to do A and B because there's no questions like it in your notes and I meant to cut them out anyway and just forgot to. Let's talk about how to do some histograms. So I'm going to do histogram of pulse rate because it's a quantitative variable. You could have done the histogram for weight and height as well because they're also quantitative. I picked it because if you look at 9, I'm going to ask you, hey, what happens if I compare pulse rates for those who smoke and don't? Because you might suspect or have some prior knowledge of that smoking affects your lung capacity and maybe that'll affect your pulse. Let's find out. Dun, dun, dun. That scrolled and I didn't mean to. Alright, so we're going to create a histogram because it's quantitative. We're going to go to graphs, histogram. So for this first one, I'm going to do simple. And you can anticipate for the second one, I'm going to be creating two groups. So I'm going to be doing that one in a second. So we're going to choose simple. And I want to do pulse rate. We're going to hit OK. And there we go. So I'm hoping you look at this and you get some bells ringing of, oh no, there's something wrong or rotten here. I have way too many spaces. And one of the things we said as a requirement for histograms and for distributions in general is that you shouldn't have too many gaps. And this one's got a lot of gaps. So it looks like I chose this you know, Minitab just chose too many bins. So we're going to go ahead and double click in here. There it goes. Single click, not double click. And we're going to click on graph elements, and we're going to change the binning of this so that it has fewer bins. So right now it has 14. I'm going to decrease this until I like it. And I know I say 8 in the notes, but I feel like that's almost too few. Yeah, that looks kind of nice. I like 8. I might use 10. I like 10 too. 9 looks the same, doesn't matter. 10, ooh, 10's kind of nice. Well, I changed my mind. Let's use 8, because that's what I said to do. Alright. So it's kind of nice in Minitab Express because you can change those as you go. Let's go ahead and copy and paste our graph in. And I like this because, yes, there is some spacing here, but it's just because this value is unusual compared to the others. But easily in here you can say, oh, it looks like my average or my typical pulse rate is somewhere between 70 and 80, and then I've got a couple people that are lower, and then occasionally you get some people that are really high. This was after they went running, by the way, in case that was unclear. Anyway. Alright, so there's our histogram. Do you like it? Center. There's my range. Here's my shape. Woohoo. Sorry. Let's go ahead and create ourselves one where we compare the smoking versus non-smoking groups for pulse rate. So I suspect something interesting is going to happen here. So we're going to go back to graph, histogram. Notice it's the first option, not because of alphabetical listing, but because it is the one that is used most frequently. So I'm going to create with groups. And so again, my Y variable, that's going to always be my quantitative variable. That's my pulse. And then my grouping variable, that's going to create my two different groups, is smoking status. Let's go ahead and hit OK. And there's my two groups. So again, I feel like too many gaps in here. I want to click in and make it have fewer bins. So go to my graph elements, do my binning, change it down. See how many. I think I'm going to like 10 again. See, they look almost the same with 8 and 10. Okay. I should have chose 10. I kind of like 10 a little better. Although these are nice and round numbers because they're 10 each, which is kind of pretty. Yeah, that's right. Pretty. Okay. Are these two groups different? Yes. Now, if you look down along the x-axis, you'll notice that they use the same scale, which is incredibly important for this, as well as for the y-axis, because you can't compare two graphs that are on different scales. They aren't being displayed similarly, so you really shouldn't be trying, I just said that word really badly. You shouldn't be trying to compare them. So the first thing I notice is that their shapes are totally different. This one's got a lump at this side and then trails off to here, and this one, like, it's lumps over here and then less of it trailing off that way. So what's interesting is, like, these two groups immediately look different just in shape, and then when you look at range, there's much more range for the non-smoking group than there is for the smoking group, and their centers are almost the same. Like, if I was to pick the center of this one, it's probably going to be like 75, and I'd probably pick like closer to 80 for this one, but they're very similar. So what's you want to be careful about with statistics is, like, so a lot of people will focus on the center or the average and say, oh, if they're the same on average, who cares? But the average is not enough, and that's one of the things that you'll see in the lesson if you haven't watched it already from the chapter is, yeah, just because your center is the same doesn't mean you look the same shape or you vary the same or have as much variability, aka the spread or range of values. So I noticed in here I go from like 60 to 120, whereas here it only just barely peaches out at 90 from 60. So the variability in the no group is much higher. I have a lot more differences in the no group than I do in the yes group. So what's interesting about this is that tells you that my smokers are all very similar for some reason, and then my non-smokers have a lot more variability. So the next thing I would ask myself is there anything else that my smokers have in common, because that might be what's actually causing this to look so different or so similar. It's rather interesting, actually. So let's go ahead and copy this and paste it into the document. Everything I've said just now is very observational. It doesn't tell you anything about the truth of how this document looks, or sorry, not this document, how this data looks. It might be, like I said, something else that's causing this. It might not. And again, there's my graph. Now, you will notice that there are some summary statistics below this. We will be doing summary statistics and things like that next time. For now, just focus on the graphs. That's what you need. So I'm going to open up my navigator window real quick so you can see everything we did. So the real reason you want to include the navigator is you're like, oh crap, I forgot to grab this graph. Boom, there it is, if you need it for something. So don't forget about the navigator. It's a nice quick way for you to grab the parts that you need or things you did earlier, or go back and look at some of your stuff. Yep. Don't delete things off of the navigator because those are your work that you'll be turning in when you do your assignment. As a reminder, this is the lesson on how to do your assignment, not your assignment itself. Your assignment will appear directly below this video. Got it? All right. If you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me. Have a good day. I hit the wrong button. That is not how I stopped the video. Where is it? Where'd my thing go? Oh, there it is. Stop recording. Bye.